and welcome to Wildly Curious, a podcast that tells you everything you need to know about nature and probably more than you wanted to know. I'm Laura.
And I'm Katie, and today we're going to talk about how birds have perfected the science of flight using physics to navigate the skies with precision and ease.
Oh, geez.
I had a little pizzazz at the end.
Yes, I like it.
Well, if you guys haven't noticed already, the name change, we did the previous episode saying, hey, we're changing the name. So, hey.
But if you missed that, guess what? You're listening to the new pod. I mean, yeah, it's the same old podcast.
It's the same podcast. Yeah, we just changed the name. Very, very briefly, go back and listen to that episode. We just talk a little bit more about why we did it. But it's not that we didn't like our last name. We did. It's just we need something that kind of rolled off the tongue a little bit better, easier to find. And so it was a business decision on mine and Laura's part to say, you know what? This is growing. We're literally topping charts right now, which is blowing my freaking mind still. 95 countries around the world, 1,400 plus cities now. And so it just made logical business sense that we had to switch to a name that was a little bit easier to find and one that Laura and I can say consistently.
And easier to tell people
consistently.
About.
Yeah. So we're excited. So it's now Wildly Curious across all the platforms. If you guys are already subscribed, I mean, if you're already listening to this one and you subscribe, I mean, you've already seen. We're changing the name in the hosting platform. We're not starting over, anything like that. So if you're subscribing, it'll pop up. No worries there. Yeah. And then the website now, you can still go to naturepodcast.com. That'll still take you there. But the new URL that we're going to be pushing is Be Wildly Curious.
That's what we want you to be.
Wildly curious. That's what we are. That's what we want you to be.
We want you to be. Real quick, I got some nature news.
Ooh, I got one too.
I don't even want to talk about it, but here we go. This title is from SciTech Daily, and it says, Baffling Scientists. Scientists discover mysterious alien flatworm in North Carolina.
I hate flatworms.
Yeah, it's so gross. So it sounds way scarier of a title than it is, but flatworms generally,
they made me click on it, so
because you're like, ew, gross. And what do you mean by alien? Flatworms are predatory, and usually you find them in like the water or in some kind of tropical environment. They're not often found on land, but they just found some. It's not unheard of, but not often. This one was found in North Carolina and Florida, like very far apart. They've never found this species. At first they were like, oh, it's this other kind of flatworm. But then they did some analysis and they're like, oh, nope. Completely different species and genus. It's not even closely related to the other flatworm.
Yeah.
This new one they have dubbed a Amaga pseudobama, which is a pretty good one, because it looks like what they thought another flatworm was called Obama nungara. So pseudobama.
What would somebody be that studies flatworm? What kind of scientist is that?
What are flatworms? They are. Oh, what's the scientific name for flatworm? I can't remember. And anyway, they don't know where they're from. They have no idea where these things originated. They just started appearing in North Carolina, first from a nursery and then from some landscapes. The problem is that sometimes flatworms carry parasites and can be like really bad for the environment, but they're so new they actually have no idea yet. They don't know what it preys on. They don't know how quickly it reproduces, and they don't know what's in store for us.
Is it going to take over the world? We don't know yet.
As we have
just
nightmares.
Have to find out. I don't know. I couldn't really find it. What type of scientist studies flatworms? That's okay. I feel bad for whoever does.
Yeah, me
That's got to be like, ugh. But I guess there's got to be somebody out there that's passionate about flatworms. I also have nature news. There was a dinosaur recently unearthed. I guess it's dug up, whatever.
Oh, cool.
It was in Alberta's Badlands, and it lived about more than 70 million years ago. It was let's see here. This would have been like last week, the week before. And the paleontologist near Grand Prairie pulled a 600-pound skull from the ground.
Jeez.
Right? They named it Big Sam, which is pretty cute. And it's an adult Pachyrhinosaurus.
Pachyrhinosaurus.
Yeah. It's the second plant-eating dinosaur to be unearthed from a dense bone bed belonging to a herd that died together on the edge of the valley that now sits 280 miles or 450 kilometers northwest of Edmond in Canada, like I said. So they did, like I said, they didn't die. It didn't die alone. They have hundreds of juvenile bones in this bone bed. So they know that there were many babies and some adults among this group. But anyway, she described this particular Pachyrhinosaurus as the smaller, older cousin of the Triceratops.
Yeah, it doesn't have the horns really on its face.
Yeah, no, the head alone, because it's 600 pounds, the head alone is about the size of a baby elephant, which is insane.
I mean, it's got like a crest. It's got like a domed nose and a little beak. Definitely Triceratopsish looking, but not with those spiky horns.
Yeah, no, definitely doesn't have the horn. So anyway, that was the Nature Juice, just real quick. Big Sam.
I want to find a Bone Bed. Also, that's a pretty cool band name, Bone Bed.
Bone Bed. That's a good one. But that's definitely obviously like heavy metal or something.
Yeah.
Bone Bed.
I was going to say, speaking of dinosaurs, great transition. You know how I love my good transitions. This one actually makes sense because we're going to start talking about birds.
Whoop whoop.
And for those of you that are on board with evolution, birds came from dinosaurs.
Those of you who are not, I mean, still listen because
totally.
We're still going to tell you how they are.
What Katie and I decided to talk about, which is in our message, is how that most birds have some incredible adaptations for flight. Now, of course, we all know that there are some exceptions.
Yeah, some didn't. Some
didn't get
that memo.
so lucky. Yeah. The ratites, like the ostriches and emus and rheas, penguins, kiwis. There's a couple of duds out there. Good in other ways with better adaptations for being on the ground. But we want to talk about flight because that's what everybody knows about birds.
And it's pretty cool.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about the adaptations to let them do it. And then Katie's going to talk about how they do it, the physics behind it.
Physics, yeah.
I'll lay the ground by how they can get off the ground.
But
Okay. There's two kinds of adaptation categories that I'd like to address. One is morphological, which just means like body parts. Obviously, to fly, you have to have wings, okay? We haven't figured out how to do it without it yet. Wings and the shape of the bird's wings functions according to their lifestyle, which Katie might or may not talk about, but different shaped wings.
I don't think I really did.
Okay, that's fine.
I mean, I kind of, but not really, yeah.
Like, if you've got wings that are big, wide, soaring wings, it's probably because you soar around looking for food like a vulture.
Yeah.
If you have, like, narrow,
tiny wings,
W-shaped wings, you're probably like a falcon, so you can fold them into close to your body and go fast. So there's, like, different shaped wings to allow birds to do different things. To fly, you also need, at least for birds, you need feathers. This is actually 5 to 10% of a bird's body weight. So sometimes feathers weigh more than their skeleton, which is just crazy to me.
Yeah.
But I believe it, having taken care of, especially owls. We have the little owl at work, and he's literally just a poof ball. I have to dig so far to get into his body to do anything to his skin.
Yeah.
And then their body shape, the shape of their actual body helps with flight and the physics of that being aerodynamic. And the birds are compact. Everything about them is, we're all long, gangly. We got like tentacles and everything, probably looks like to birds.
I am forever calling my arms and legs tentacles, not appendages. They are now called tentacles.
Yeah. Surely they look like that to a bird who's like.
It has to.
They're very compact. Everything is all together. It helps them to be able to fly. But I think that a lot of people probably know what a bird looks like and that it can help them fly. So I want to spend way more time talking about anatomical adaptations, things that we can't see, but that are super cool that allow a bird to fly. So first off, we got their bones. The bones of a bird make up about 6 to 8% of their body mass, okay? And humans, relative, like the comparison, ours is about 14% of our mass. So our skeleton is like 2 times heavier in proportion to our body than a bird's bones. Why is this? They have a couple of strategies here for their skeleton. One, they've just chucked some of those bones over the years. Eliminated it.
Can you imagine just one day being like, you know what?
Drop it.
Yeah, your pointer finger, who really needs the point? Your ring finger, who needs it? Pointless. Like, you don't really need it. Just get rid of it. Just drop it. Will be lighter.
That's right.
By ounces.
And they did that. They did drop finger bones. They dropped a leg bone or two. And they dropped tailbones. So just chucked them. They didn't need them. Those that they did keep, some of them they just fused together. So it's just one bone now rather than 2. Now that doesn't have anything to do with weight, but it does help make their skeleton more rigid, which at first you'd be like, why does that help? Because flight is extremely taxing on a skeleton. which I'm sure you talk about, at least as far as like the physics of flight, there's a lot of force going on. So you need to be strong. So their thoracic vertebrae, which is your torso, okay, like your middle backbones, those are all fused together. And that helped between their arms. Their pelvis is fused. The remaining finger bones are fused. Their remaining leg bones are fused.
You would like never have to go to a chiropractor. That sounds actually kind of sounds amazing.
Right? And their collarbone is fused, which is the wishbone that people sometimes do their wishbone things with. Yep. We just snap that. We're like, we don't like it fused. Break it.
Make a wish. Yeah.
So eliminated bones, fused bones, and then hollowed out those bones. The science word for hollow bones is pneumatization. And I actually learned some stuff like I always do for this podcast. And I knew that birds have hollow bones. But there's some things that I've always been told that might not necessarily be true. So let's see if you know them too, Katie. So the myth is that having hollow bones always makes the bird proportionally lighter. And that is not always the case. Okay?
Yeah.
So just because you've got hollow bones doesn't mean you're necessarily lighter, because the bone itself can be more dense.
Yeah.
But it definitely does help to eliminate weight in some.
Oh, yeah, for
but
sure.
They've taken, let's say, for example, they've taken like a leg bone from like a rat, the same size leg bone from a bird, and the bird and the rat leg bone weigh the same. Okay. Sometimes those bones are like that. Sometimes the bones are just lighter, but it is a myth that all those bones are lighter than all the bones of a rodent of the same size.
Yeah.
More pressures are placed on a bird skeleton than any kind of terrestrial mammal skeleton. They have to be completely able to support their body weight on either just their front limbs, their wings, or just their back limbs, their legs when they're standing on the ground. Whereas our skeletons are pretty, like we are bipedal, we will walk upright now, but most mammals walk on 4 legs. So their skeleton is very evenly distributed.
Yeah,
a bird is either real top heavy or real bottom heavy. Their bones and our arms and leg bones have to be really strong. And they also have a giant sternum to have all of those wing muscles connected to. They've got that giant sternum down the front of their chest. Some bones are lighter, while others are heavier, like I was saying, when compared with mammal bones of similar sizes and types. And it seems like they've studied these, and they think that bird skeletons have about as much total body mass as do the skeletons of many terrestrial mammals. Not us, we're 14, but many mammals are. And despite some variation in density, bird bones are on average denser than some of them, because of the strains of flight.
Yeah.
And the bones themselves are hollow, but actually they look like a cobweb inside because they have very rigid internal structures, like a lattice work, to keep those bones from just snapping in half.
Which we talked about, and could you fight that a little bit?
Yeah, just snap those bird bones. I will come back to the hollow bones when I talk about some other stuff later, but that's the skeleton. So the entire bird skeleton and the skull, also part of the skeleton, they've ditched teeth, which would add weight because they're your bones.
Yeah.
So they've ditched the teeth, and that makes it so they also they have no need for such a big jaw because there's nothing in there to root. So their whole skull can be smaller. Even ones that are cracking seeds and doing things like that, those birds have decent sized jaws, but it's more about pressures and forces of the beak than it is about the muscles. Okay, that was skeleton. Reproductive organs. Many birds have reproductive organs that change size depending on whether it's breeding season or not, which is pretty cool. So if it's breeding season, big testes and ovaries. Not breeding season, teeny tiny.
There we go.
Yeah. And they've also figured out that, you know what? They really only need their left ovary. They don't need the other one.
Interesting.
Why have two?
I mean, yeah, why have two? That's what I was just going to say. I was like, why have two? Why have two?
Why have two? It's too much weight. So they ditched the left one. As far as their excretory system, because who doesn't like to talk about excretions?
A good poop, yeah.
They have no bladder or urethra. So they've just ditched that system. Birds, if anybody have ever seen bird poop, which I'm sure you all have, it's not quite like human poop. It is that white and the brown. That's uric acid. Okay, it's not the same thing as our feces. Uric acid is their urine, but it's not like a liquid. It's like a paste. It's produced from the kidneys and goes straight into the cloaca. And I know we've talked about this before, but the cloaca is the one hole that they've got. It's where their poop, their eggs,
one hole for everything.
their uric acid, and their reproductive juices all come from. So
I feel like there's a more scientific way to say that, but yeah, that's that.
The excretory system is super simplified. All right, here's where some blowing my mind was the respiratory system. I know that we learned about the bird respiratory system in ornithology in college.
It is pretty crazy. I think it's pretty cool.
But there's some things that I swear that I didn't learn and definitely didn't remember. Okay. Because if before this podcast, you were like, hey, Laura, how does a bird breathe? I would be not actually able to tell you, apparently.
I can to this day still draw a pair, like what the parabronchi, and of a bird's lung. But ornithology class, at least because Laura and I took it, and in college in Ohio, and we spent more time making sure we could identify ducks than.
I do remember having to draw it though, for sure, like for a test.
Or that time that we almost died in the back of the van.
Yep,
because we got
going into a lake.
Yeah, going into the lake.
So bird respiratory systems are bananas. They are proportionately larger and more efficient than ours, which makes sense because flying takes way more oxygen.
Yeah.
So follow me here about how a bird breathes. When we breathe, we waste a ton of oxygen because all we get is what's in our air sacs, in our lungs, in the alveoli, at the very little tips of all the branches in your lungs. That's the only place that you're actually getting oxygen. And anywhere else is just wasted oxygen because nothing is being absorbed. So anything in your trachea or in the beginning parts of your lungs, wasted. Birds use every last speck of oxygen they can by utilizing their air sacs. So most birds breathe in and air goes all the way down their bodies into these air sacs that they have down near their rears. Birds have several air sacs in their bodies. Think of them almost like a lung. So they've got their air sacs, but they're really just holding containers for air for a second. They breathe in, air goes to the sacs near the end. They breathe out, and it goes into their lungs where gas exchange happens. When it's in the lungs doing that gas exchange, there is something that's called cross-current circulation. So basically, the air is circulating one way in their lungs. The blood in the lung tissue is circulating the other way. So it's like scooping all the air as much as it can, and way more efficient for gas exchange. If you, in your head, can picture our lungs, and if you've ever seen a picture of a human lung and the little alveoli, they're like literally like little grape clusters at the end. Birds don't have those. Birds have tubes. So these tubes, almost like a radiator, like in a car for cooling, it's these tubes, and then the blood is going one way and the air is going the other way. So that's breathe in, air sacs, breathe out, lungs, breathe in, air goes then to the air sacs in the front of the bird, while more air is already being taken into the back of the bird.
Yeah.
And then they breathe out and it goes out of their body. So it's like a 4-step rotation for one breath, while a second breath is already in the body. So
it's almost like they breathe in and out at the same time. Like
air is doing 2 things in their body at one time.
For one step of breathing in, it's moving around things every single time. Yeah.
And weirdly enough, this actually, because they're so incredibly efficient, they don't have to breathe as much as we do per the amount of heartbeats. Okay. All animals have different rates of heartbeats and different rates of respiration. But, we're breathing like in and out per so many heartbeats. Birds are like heartbeat, 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 breath, heartbeat, heart. So like they can wait longer because they're absorbing so much oxygen because their bodies are just better at it.
As an asthmatic, I'm jealous.
Yeah, right. They're just really good at breathing. And the thing that I know that I didn't know is that their air sacs are even attached to the hollow areas of their bones. So their bones are holding onto oxygen, like onto air. So their bones are an extension of their air sacs. They are literally just little airbags flying through the air.
Little
crazy.
airbags. I'm going to take this up with our ornithology professor. I'm Facebook friends with his wife still. I'm going
to tell us that their air sacs connected to their bones.
I'm going to put in a complaint with his wife and let him know.
All right. Muscles. This accounts for 1/6 the weight of a bird, which makes sense. Their birds are pretty jacked because they got to be able to fly, and that takes a lot of muscle. Flight muscles are full of blood. Hence, when we say that a bird might have the dark meat.
My favorite part.
Definitely. 1000%.
Don't waste your time with white meat.
Yeah. Dark meat is the one that can sustain flight. All right. So like birds that are flying all the time, they're like all dark meat. Okay. White meat is really only found in birds that don't fly very much at all because they don't need very much blood in those muscles because they're not doing much. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So like a chicken, white meat is on the breastbone. Why? Because chickens don't fly almost at all. So their breast muscles don't have to have very much circulation. Where if I were to eat a peregrine falcon, or an albatross,
that's dark good meat. Dark meat right there.
So
please don't go eat albatross.
Or peregrine falcons. Definitely endangered species.
Yeah, right.
Not advocating for it, but probably delicious. So even though they're heavy, that's an added weight they have to make up for by losing something else. Digestion. Birds have crazy fast metabolisms, as anybody who's ever worked with a bird can tell you. They're just pooping machines.
Every time, yeah.
I talked about how the excretory system, they just ditched the whole urinary stuff, but they're also producing crazy amounts of waste. Small birds digest food in 45 minutes. All right.
Could you imagine if that was humans? Like,
you just eat a snack and 45 minutes later, poop it out, clean as a whistle inside.
Clean as a whistle.
Truly, because they can't afford to have anything in there.
That would honestly be pretty great.
It would be pretty great. I bet you feel a lot better. So that's a small bird, and it can be even faster if you're like a fruit eater. Ostriches, of course, are the longest. They're not flighted. They don't need to poop as much. But even an ostrich poops it out in 6 hours.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Whereas a average human, 2 to 5 days. So what I ate 2 days ago is finally coming out. Maybe longer, depending on what I ate. Birds have also ditched their gallbladder.
Because who needs it anyway?
Yeah, it's only causing me issues, let me tell you. And they have a shorter rectum. So they're like, you know what? Let's just shorten this process. Birds are efficient. That is the best word for a bird. Birds are efficient as hell. They are just like, no extras. I am what I am, and I am made to fly.
I am what I am, and I'm made to fly.
I need to have that on a t-shirt. I am what I am.
I'm made to fly.
All right. One last thing, the circulatory system. So typically, birds have proportionately larger hearts than their same size mammalian counterparts, that pump blood faster. Again, this is all about because of the energy required for flight. They have to have more oxygen in their blood and so their blood has to be pumping faster to carry that oxygen. Hummingbirds, of course, have the largest heart compared to body size. Yeah. And that's because their heart is beating up to 1,200 beats per minute. That's the record for a bird. 1,200 beats per minute. Whereas humans, typically 72 beats per minute. Other than that, bird hearts look just like human hearts. I mean, we've got the 4 chambers just like they do. But there is something about like the actual, not chemical structure, but like the physical properties of a bird heart that has less friction when it pumps than a human heart. It creates less friction. I guess I don't know if it's slipperier. Like, I don't know. Less friction. Slippery heart. Those slippery little hearts make it, which gives it an easier time pumping. And if you have to be pumping 1,200 times per minute, you need a slippery heart.
Right.
To get it done. So everything about a bird, from their bones to their organs to their circulations to their poop, like all of it, it is about being efficient and adapted to flight, either by being lighter or by being stronger.
Which makes sense. Alrighty. Adaptations, you good?
Good.
Alrighty. Let's talk about the physics then behind it. And some of this obviously is going to overlap because, again, birds are efficient. We're not, but birds are. So I'm just going to go ahead and break down the physics of bird flight. And give you the different parts of physics that allows birds to fly, and then I'm going to give an example of 3 birds I think I have that I'm going to be talking about.
Because like I've said, right, like the birds are built to do it, but like how do they do it? I think a lot of people just accept that things can fly. I don't know if everyone understands it.
Why? Yeah. Let's get into the physics of it. We're going to talk about lift, thrust, drag, and gravity. All right, lift. Without it, birds would literally be doing a whole lot of face planting into the ground. Like, that's just...
If any of you have ever tried to fly, this is what we're lacking.
Yeah, lift. All right, well, a bird's wing is shaped like an airfoil. I know it's a weird word, but it just means the wing is curved on the top and flatter on the bottom, just like Laura said, like an airplane wing. This shape is a game changer because when air hits that wing, it's forced to spread out and speed up. This faster moving air creates lower pressure on the top of the wing. At the same time, the slower air under the wing has higher pressure.
Pushing up.
Okay. Yep. The difference in pressure, higher below and lower above, creates lift, which pushes the bird up. So really, the wing shape is what makes the air speed up, and that speed difference is what gives the bird lift. The whole understanding of lift is thanks to Bernoulli's principle. Shout out to Daniel Bernoulli, who is a Swiss mathematician who figured out that when the speed of a moving fluid, in this case air, increases, the pressure within that fluid decreases. So the air zips over the wing, pressure drops, and the bird gets a free ride upward. Bernoulli might not have been thinking about birds, but I'm sure birds are probably a big fan of his work. They were like,
okay, whatever. We've been doing this for, a couple million years.
Millions of years, Bernoulli, right? So that's lift. Now, thrust, on the other hand, lift alone isn't going to get a bird anywhere. They need some forward motion, and that's where thrust comes in. Every time a bird flaps its wings, it's basically pushing air backward. And in return, the air pushes that bird forward. Again, this is another physics law, is Newton's third law, the one that says for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So the bird says, hey, air, I'm going to push you this way. And the air is like, cool, I'm going to push you the opposite direction. And that's every single time a bird flaps
So it's almost
wings.
Like they're swimming through the air.
Yeah. Essentially, yeah. So it's a constant back and forth with the bird using its wings to slice through the air, and flapping isn't just the casual up and down motion. Birds have to time it just right, downstrokes for power, and then they tote their wings a bit on the upward stroke to reset without losing too much momentum.
That's what I was just going to say, because it would create, you'd think it would be like a paddle. So they've got to push down, but they don't want to create drag going up.
Correct. So it's a spin.
Whoa. So they're like doing like a serpentine thing with their wing.
Yep. The same thing whenever you're kayaking or anything like that. You have to think about how you're paddling, kayaking, canoe. It's the same thing because, it just expends energy. And again, if you're thinking of a paddle for a canoe, all right, if you don't pick the paddle up properly, as I'm doing the motion that, unless you're on Patreon, you can't see. But if you want to see me doing these hand motions, support us on Patreon. And you can see the whole video uploaded there. But if it doesn't come up right, then you're just going to be like, okay, push it
dragging
down to go forward.
The water.
Yeah, and then you're pushing yourself backwards every time. And then you're like, okay, so it's the definition of like 2 steps forward, 4 steps back kind of thing every single time. So to avoid that, birds, they have to tote their wings at the right momentum and the right time. And different birds do that different ways based upon what they need.
Okay.
And I'll get into that for a little bit. So different birds specialize in different things.
Yeah. And we all see the birds flap different way. I mean, like some birds flap a ton and some birds barely flap.
Yeah. Alrighty. Next one, drag. Now, if there was all smooth sailing from here, birds would have it easy. But of course, nothing in science or life ever is that simple. So in enters drag. All right. Air
what a drag.
Right? Enter drag. Air resistance, nature's way of saying, not so fast, buddy. Drag is always trying to slow the bird down, pulling on its wings, body, and tail constantly. So what do birds do? They get sleek. Their bodies are streamlined, built to cut through the air. That's what it is. Yeah. I didn't know what another word. It's like a torpedo. Yeah. I didn't know what other word, because it is a torpedo. You think of, and I'm going to get into it here in a second. Some birds, like falcons, take that definition of like to a whole other meaning. They tuck their wings in during a dive to minimize drag, turning themselves into feathery missiles, essentially. All right, last one, and then I'll get into some bird examples here, is gravity. Of course,
just gravity.
Gravity is just gravity.
The other big downer for birds.
What a drag, and then there's gravity. But obviously, it's always pulling everything back down to earth. Birds are constantly fighting for this invisible force, and gravity is relentless, obviously. It's like playing a tug-of-war 24/7, but birds have it down to a science to avoid that. They counteract gravity with lift that I already briefly talked about, and they also are super precise about it. They adjust the angle of their wings. This is literally called the angle of attack, to either create more lift or less, depending on what they need. If they want to gain altitude, flap harder, tilt those wings upward, and you're on your way up. Want to descend, ease up on the lift, let gravity take over, but without crashing, because that would just be awkward to have your other bird friends see you crash.
The whole learning to fly thing is just mind-blowing.
Just kick you out of a nest, and
it's dangerous enough to be a human baby, but like you're already on the ground. Like,
yeah, it's not so bad.
Plant, but it would be terrible.
Yeah, you're not teaching your human baby to walk on the edge of a 30-foot building, and if you fall, I mean, hopefully
you better flap.
Yeah, you better flap your wings, because like, or else you're gonna die. So
yeah, that's intense, man. All of the science that they're not even thinking about, but like, better figure it out, because otherwise, dead.
Yeah, man. I can't imagine. Talk about life trauma. All the birds. That's why they're up so early screaming, because they're just like
all the PTSD and trauma. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to cover 3 birds, because it is like they are the definition of 3 different kind of unique physics behind flying. It's the albatross, falcon, and the hummingbird.
Hooray!
All right. Now, albatross, they've got the basics down. So let's look at a little bit more in depth. So this bird is the king of gliding for sure, and happens to be a tattoo I have on my back. If anyone's interested, one of Luke's favorites. Because if I move my arms, my shoulders back and forth. Again, if you were on Patreon, you could see me flapping my arms. But when I do that, the bird flaps. That's my son's favorite. Albatross are found mostly in the southern hemisphere, especially around the Southern Ocean. But there are some species in northern Pacific, places like Hawaii, Alaska, and Japan. They are one of my favorite birds. They're really cool. They're seabirds, which means they spend most of their lives in the open ocean, only coming to land to breed. Albatrosses are long-lived birds, some species living over 60 years, which is crazy. One famous albatross named Wisdom, a Laysan albatross, I think I'd say that right, is over 70 years old and still laying eggs. So just wanted to give it a little natural history, and I'll give a little natural history on each of them. But again, albatross, just really cool birds. All right, so now the reason albatross can glide for hours without flapping has everything to do with physics, specifically, good grief, or as my son says, pacifically, the forces that affect how it moves through the air. The secret is something called dynamic soaring, which, I don't know, it just sounds like a weird word, but it's pretty simple. The albatross use dynamic soaring to essentially ride the wind. So here's how it works. The bird takes advantage of the wind currents above the ocean. The wind near the surface is slower because of friction with the water, but higher up, it's much faster. So albatross does this clever little move. It dips down into the slower air near the surface, then rises up into the faster air higher up. This creates a cycle where it picks up speed going up and then coasts down. Compared to a surfer rides the top of a wave to keep going without paddling, essentially. And so it's just going to keep going up and down and up and down. And it's, I didn't look and see how many like flaps an albatross does, but it's insanely slow compared to other birds that are like flap, flap, flap. No, it's like flap, glide, wait forever. Flap, wait forever.
Again, where that rigid skeleton comes in handy.
Right, very much so. Instead of constantly battling drag or flapping for thrust, the albatross lets the wind do the heavy lifting, gliding effortlessly for hours upon hours.
Cool.
Plus, it has very long, narrow wings that are just built for this.
Yeah.
They minimize drag and maximize lift, meaning the albatross can stay aloft for ages without burning out and getting tired. So in terms of energy efficiency, the albatross is definitely the
figure it out.
Yeah, of peak of long distance flying. Here we go. I can do this and use very, very little energy to do so. So albatross. Next one, the peregrine falcon. The peregrine falcon is definitely the king of speed. The bird doesn't just fly, it dives essentially like a missile.
Yeah, it's the fastest animal on the planet.
Yes. Peregrine falcons are found pretty much everywhere except Antarctica, and they can adapt to all kinds of environment, from tundra to tropical forest. These birds have even moved into cities where the buildings act like the perfect cliffs for them to nest on. And I want to say, for the most part, most cities in the U.S. anyway have peregrine falcons. Like, they're just everywhere. They're medium-sized birds, usually only a few pounds, with a wingspan about 3 to 4 feet. I didn't really say, I don't think, the albatross wingspan, but it's like huge. Like, yeah. 10 plus feet, I think, I want to say.
I'll look it up. You keep going.
Yeah, could you look it up? But don't let their small size fool you. These birds are incredibly powerful. They've been used in falconry, which is hunting with birds, for thousands of years because of their insane speed and precision.
8 to 11 and a half.
What was it?
8 to 11 and a half.
Yeah, which is crazy.
For albatross.
All right, so we talked a little bit of natural history. So yeah, a peregrine falcon is only, what did I say? 3 to 4 feet, yeah. So significantly small.
Yeah, but they're not made for gliding. They're made for speed.
For diving. Let's go on to the physics behind the speed. All right. So first off, when a peregrine falcon is cruising normally, its wings are outstretched and it's using thrust from flapping to maintain forward motion, like most birds. But when it spots prey, one of its favorite foods being pigeons, thank God, just kill them all. My least favorite bird being attacked by one of my favorite birds. I love peregrine falcons. When it spots prey and it goes into the hunting dive, or what's called the stoop, everything changes about that bird. The falcon pulls its wings in tight, making its upper body streamlined. This minimizes drag, which again is that force that tries to slow the bird down, letting the falcon accelerate quickly. So here's where gravity takes over. Once the falcon is in the dive, gravity basically does the rest of the work. This bird is essentially falling, but it controls the fall using that streamlined body shape to reach speeds that make it the fastest animal in the world. So at speeds like this, a peregrine falcon's body is built to handle some serious air pressure. Its strong chest muscles, like Laura was saying, helps it keep control. And special, they're called baffles in the nostrils, prevent air from rushing in too fast and overwhelming the lungs.
Yeah, for anybody who remember when you were a kid and you stick your head out the window and you're like,
yeah. Which clearly Laura has done more than once.
Can't breathe.
Right? But without those adaptations, the sheer speed would probably knock the bird out mid dive, because again, it's 200 miles an hour. It's going so much faster than what anything else could go. While gravity is pulling it downward, the falcon uses the angle of its dive to maintain control and direct its path, almost like a pilot steering a plane, essentially.
Which is why it like insta-kills whatever it hits.
It is. If you guys have never seen a peregrine falcon killing a pigeon, because as soon as it goes to hit it, it flares out its wings and tail at the very last second. When I say the very last second, I mean
Which can you also even imagine the forces acting on those poor wings?
Oh
like,
my gosh.
No wonder they have to have a rigid structure. It would rip the wings off of something else.
Could you imagine?
Like, you put them out and they just rip off backwards. Like, because you're stopping flat at 200 miles an hour.
200 miles an hour.
Rip your arm off. Just rip it off.
Oh my gosh. But if you haven't seen a video of a peregrine falcon attacking, like getting a bird, please do. It is insane. Because it's literally just all of a sudden you just see the peregrine falcon whoop, spread out and then just a ball of feathers.
Yeah.
But yeah, because it's so fast.
Snaps the spine just because it's hitting so hard.
Yeah.
Because 200 miles, like, it's so
over
crazy.
200 miles an hour. Yeah. All right. So the last one I want to very briefly talk about here is the hummingbird.
Wait,
all
nope. Last thing. Now I'm on a tangent. Do you think it would kill you if a peregrine falcon hit you in the head at 200 miles an hour?
Oh, it would have to.
Because it's like 5 pounds, right? Because like a baseball would.
Oh, yeah.
But a baseball's not is even less heavy, but it's smaller, so maybe the impact.
Females are 1.5 to 3.3 pounds, and males are like 0.73 to 2.2 pounds. I think it would.
Yeah, I think it probably would.
I think it would. Again, it's just the sheer mass, even though it's like muscle and like flabbiness, you know what I mean? But still, I think it would knock you out.
Messy either way.
Yeah. It's messy either way. That would be so gross.
Sorry, now you can continue. Hummingbirds.
Okay, now hummingbirds. We could go off on these tangents all day, folks. All day. All right. So now the hummingbird's hovering ability is like nothing else in the bird world. The physics behind it is really interesting. Again, I'm just going to scratch this on the surface level.
Yeah, go watch a slow-mo video of a hummingbird.
It's crazy. So instead of flapping its wings up and down like other birds, hummingbirds move their wings in a figure 8 pattern. This lets them generate lift on both the upstroke and the downstroke, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Imagine they're paddling the air like a rowboat, except they're rowing in all directions at once, essentially.
Yeah,
like
they're just treading.
Yeah, they're just doing it all. This unique wing motion gives them the ability to hover in place, fly backwards, and dart side to side, all with incredible precision. But here's where the physics kick in. To hover, hummingbirds need a lot of lift. Their wings beat so fast that they're generating lift almost constantly. But it does come at a cost, the huge energy consumption.
Yeah.
Remember, like the albatross barely uses any energy at all.
Yeah, these guys have the 1,200 beat heartbeat.
Yeah, these guys are just using up energy like it's no one's business here. And that's why they need to eat so often. But because their wing beats are so rapid, they generate just the right amount of thrust to balance gravity and keep them suspended in midair. The shape of their wings also plays a big role. Unlike most birds, which have long, stiff wings, hummingbirds have shorter, more flexible, and they are more flexible at the shoulder joint. This flexibility allows them to adjust the angle and wing beats to get the exact amount of lift they need for hovering and darting around. So it's all about maximizing the control and the minimal wing area on which
because they need to hover at the exact right height for that flower and then maintain that height. Not too much high, not too much low. Like, I can't imagine like just maintaining it.
Right? It would be crazy. So their wing muscles make up about 30% of their total body weight, giving them the power they need for rapid wing beats. Just for comparison, most average human muscle makes up about 40% of their body weight. And since the hummingbird's metabolism is so fast, they're burning through energy, like I said, like crazy to keep up. But overall, this energy investment is worth it. They can hover, reverse, and change direction in the blink of an eye, making them one of the most maneuverable birds on the planet.
Yeah, I mean, they're like a dragonfly, but they're a bird, not an insect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is
just
crazy.
nuts. Yeah. They actually, and they need so much food that they go through, it's not hibernation, but they go through torpor at night in order to not die in the night, because that's how much energy they need. Like, they have to slow everything down to a state of like a coma.
Yeah.
Go into a coma every night and then wake up and do it all again. Sounds exhausting.
Poor little hummingbirds.
Yeah, I would not want to be a hummingbird. And then have to fly to Mexico from when you're like this big. Like, thank you. No, thank you.
Right? Goodness. Well, that's everything about the physics of birds on my part then.
They're freaking crazy, man.
So, like we said at the beginning of the episode, we're now called Wildly Curious. Make sure you guys check us out on Patreon, Be Wildly Curious. And the biggest thing you'll get there is the videos. All right. So by supporting us and helping Laura and I keep going with all this stuff, you'll be able to watch the full video. So right now you're hearing the audio on Patreon. You'll be able to see just all of
the facial expressions.
Yeah. And it's unedited whenever we do that too. So it's always fun. So yeah, make sure you check us out there. Next week, we're back with another cave episode.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be exciting. And Laura will be talking about, I forget whatever's next, but whatever Laura has next. The first two episodes was the methane cave. And then I talked about the Siberian unicorn. And then I guess you just have to listen next week. I'm
pretty sure that mine is of biblical proportions.
Biblical proportions.
I'm pretty sure.
Probably. All right, guys. Well, this has been another new-ish episode of Wildly Curious. So thank you guys for listening, and listen to us next week.
See you.